We're going to call to order. Transportation Advisory Board, September 11th. Call to order, I guess. We can start with a roll call.
Okay, Vice Chair Lehner. I'm sorry, Chair Lehner. Board Member Bennett.
Here.
Board Member Wicklund. Here. Board Member Christ. Here. Board Member McInerney. Here. Board Member McKee Burrows. Here. Board Member Kim.
Okay, we need to approve the minutes of the preceding meeting. Are there any corrections that need to be made to the August meeting minutes?
Just one. It is my name again. Page 4, line 3, Wickland with a U. But, you know, that's about it.
Okay, I see we have another.
Yeah, a couple of notes. Page 9, line 8, deleting the word how seems to be required for that sentence to make sense. And page 9, line 11, adding the word to, T-O, will improve the sentence that goes something like accidents that caused damage to that residence fence, end quote. Otherwise, I just want to compliment our secretary for the good work on the meeting minutes. And a question for Chair Lehner. I have a couple of other comments that aren't really corrections to the minutes, but they're follow-ups to things that are mentioned in the minutes. Should that come later on during board comments at the end?
Yeah, let's approve the minutes and then we can
Okay.
add that into comments.
Great.
Any other corrections to the minutes of the August meeting? Okay, can we get a motion to approve?
I'll move that we approve the minutes for our August meeting.
I'll second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We'll now go to communications from staff. Oh,
There it goes. You have to approve me, I guess, now. Thank you. Appreciate it. So I'm Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the City of Longmont. We have a few things from staff we want to just chat about. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to Board Member Wicklund for attending our Climate Action Sunday yesterday. If anybody else was there, I guess I didn't see you, but it was a pretty interesting event. We saw a pretty cool movie about bicycling, and he and I participated on a panel of 4 people to talk a little bit about the movie and talk about what Longmont's doing as far as bicycling from 2 different perspectives. So, 4 different total, but 2 different for us. So thank you, Board Member Wickland, for doing that. I appreciate you volunteering for that. Also, we wanted to talk a little bit about microtransit. You've probably seen that a lot in the news lately. We're very excited to say that over 3 years, we're expecting to see $1.15 million from Regional Transportation District, RTD, to provide to our microtransit system. We think this will save them quite a bit of money. And so we're hoping to see more dollars roll in as we work with them on these issues. So we're very excited to we really want to get that started in 2024. It'll all be based on kind of contracts and agreements and going through the proposal process again. So we may be asking a TAB member to be on our request for proposals to review those, and segueing into the idea that we'd really like to thank Board Member McInerney for helping us with the RFP process for the transportation mobility plan. So we did choose a consulting firm. We can't say who it is because we're working with the contract now, but we hope to let you know next month. Hopefully we can be under contract in that month time period and start spending some of the dollars we have available this year on that project and get the transportation mobility plan moving. So thanks for that. I really appreciate your time on that. You got the email from Jim about Spring Gulch number 2. Actually, it was from Alden Jenkins, to Jim, to you. So is there anything else to add about that project?
No, we're getting started on it. That was kind of the gist of it. So just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. So it's another multimodal mobility project that will provide, I think, a much needed connection down there away from roads, as well as tying in with an underpass under 119 that's already in place. So we're looking forward to it.
Great, thank you. I just want to make sure that's in the record, and I know it went through emails, but it's good to kind of say it out loud to folks who were watching, because we know some people are watching. We actually got approached at one of the events this summer by somebody who said, "Hey, I know you from TAB." So people are watching, so I just want to make that note as well. I think that's all I have, but I did want to turn it over for and this is kind of a trick on Kyle a little bit here, but I just wanted to let him update us on our RFPs and the progress on Main Street.
Yeah, so we started construction on the RFRBs along Main Street at the 300, 400, and 500 block of downtown, and thanks to some assistance from Member Wickland with some irrigation help, relocating some sprinkler lines underneath the walk. We should expect those to be active by early next week, pending no further issues, but happy to get those nice activated and have a safer downtown.
Chair, that's all we have from staff.
Great, thank you. Do we have any public? Doesn't look like it, but I wanted to check. For once, should I say? No. Okay, so we'll go to information items. I think here on the start here is the Vision Zero work session on the staff proposed outline. I think the best way to handle this is probably to start with Council Member Bennett and get his thoughts, I think changes or input on the outline. And we'll just go through the board with each member providing their input. Would that be appropriate?
That works perfect for staff. We did have, you were absent at the last meeting, Chair, and we did have a motion, as you saw in the minutes, to work on this item. We didn't have enough time. We didn't have the votes available, the 4 votes needed to pass that. So we wanted to make sure we brought it to this agenda and for this agenda item. So that would be perfect.
Okay, so I guess not to stop any discussion or debate, but I think we should just go and start with Councilmember Bennett with your input. Let every person have kind of say and input into that. And then anything that we want to do a follow-up on, we can do after that. Does that sound like it's good with everybody? I don't see any. Okay, go right ahead.
All right. Thank you, Chair. So I would say that the first thing that strikes my attention is after researching the different cities that have already successfully adopted Vision Zero, I am against having a date. 2040 it seems like a disingenuous, pulled it out of a hat kind of date, and that we can still be very straightforward with our communications without putting a date on our action plan. I have hesitance towards. I would just like to know more information about effectiveness and increasing safety regarding red light cameras. I'm worried about the equity and the impact that that may have on families that may not be that surprise speeding ticket could impose, and if that is the utilitarian purpose in order to keep people safe. And then on policy line 21, I would like to see ensuring fairness and equality throughout Vision Zero projects. I'd like to change equality to equity. I think that we can balance both keeping people safe and also ensuring that we're not disenfranchising people. Line 22, I just am unclear on the speed management program what collectors means and would like further clarification. And then moving on to stakeholders. I would, for other organizations, Boulder County has question marks, and I'd like to suggest that it's Boulder County Public Works, since they have that's where the transportation data is housed. I'd like to also include transport, the micro transit contractor that we will have in the future, and via transportation, as well as the Vision Zero network, as well as considering federal funding sources as also potential stakeholders, which could be anything like the Highway Safety Improvement Project, et cetera. And that was the main things that caught my attention. Thank you.
So I'm going to add a caveat, maybe with something like collector in that question, we could go ahead and get that answered right now.
Yep. Glad to do it. So Board Member Bennett, the collectors, so there's different levels of roadways that we categorize within the City of Longmont, and it basically starts at that local street level, which is mostly where our homes are located and the driveways to those homes, and then those locals access to a collector street, which is that next level up of street, less access and more mobility. But there can also be homes fronting on that as well. I mean, think about 3rd Avenue as a collector. And so those streets take us out to arterial streets, which is that next level. We actually have minor arterials as well. So a minor arterial it will help us get there as well. The minor arterial, good example of that is probably 21st Avenue. The 4-lane section works as a minor arterial. And then the primary arterials are typically the Hover, Airport Road, 17th, 9th. And so that's kind of the old style way of getting, of kind of building the town and getting people to these different levels of roadway. And then there's also a level that we don't have many of, but they're minor regional arterials, which are kind of the 119s east of town and then the interstates. So a couple different levels of roadway classification that we use. It's used a lot for modeling purposes so that we can try to evaluate and predict traffic in the future. So we use a lot of that for those purposes. But that's the purpose of a collector. I hope that helps answer, but it's a little, maybe there's somebody else who'd like to add a little bit. Kyle? Okay.
I guess a better question is, do you have any more questions about collectors? It might be an easier way to just guide this discussion.
So we Engage Longmont has the Envision Longmont has the multimodal plan. There's a graphic in there that shows all of the lays out the collectors, arterials, and then kind of the local city streets with colors. We could probably pull that off and send it to the board. So, to start that conversation, you can see what that kind of visually what that looks like. And I think we classify the both collectors and arterials as minor and major. A lot of times we just use the term collector or arterial versus a minor or major, but you can see the difference in the graphic, and it's kind of obvious for the roads you see as you travel through town. Kind of see what the way traffic flows and the volumes of traffic. And Phil's going to bring it up now.
Yeah, I've gone to this map a few times. We get a lot of questions about it, and it is a bit confusing, but here's kind of what we do is we've broken it into different lanes as well, planned lanes for the future. And so you'll see we have, and this is again why we are redoing the transportation mobility plan or updating it, because some of this policy has changed, quite frankly, in the last couple of years. So a lot of the lane configurations that you see on Ken Pratt Boulevard, Highway 119 will probably disappear, but it does tell you that that is a regional arterial, which is more of that. Any regional arterial is considered a state highway in our group here. The red is the next level of arterials. That's the city owned and maintained arterials, the minor arterials, and then that collector level is that bluish line at that next level down, and then you'll see the locals are all kind of underneath in gray, kind of that underlying street network that we all know as places where we live typically.
Great, thank you, Phil, and thank you for bringing that up so quickly. So we'll go to Councilmember Wicklund.
Well, thank you, Chair. Well, let's see, the kind of my I look in more broad thinking. So I think for objectives are great. Multimodal, if we could maybe more or less define that and maybe include even transit use in there to reduce also VMT, vehicle miles traveled for everyone else. And then engineering, I know there's improved traffic signals, revised traffic signal practices. Maybe also have a D and have look at alternative intersection design as well. So such as roundabouts, because they are the safest option. Let's see. And then I'm assuming in the education part, line 17, temporary traffic control devices, community training. I'm thinking this kind of relates to, I think if you remember when we went, or I met you, I ran into you in Fort Collins and we saw the kidney beam type of thing. So I'm thinking that's what kind of that goes for, to help educate different road design. But then also, I've been seeing this in Denver, in my brother's neighborhood, but more actually implemented with more plastic bollards. So I don't know if that could be a policy part in there to kind of speed things up until we have money for permanent infrastructure. And I would love on line 28 for policy to get rid of the question mark on the NACTO. Let's just do it. Yeah, flat. And then let's see. One question is stakeholders is neighborhood services, and I just want a definition of that. And then I do have a general broad question after the fact.
So just to answer about the neighborhood services, that's a group within the city.
Yeah.
Within external services, we do have a neighborhood group leaders association that is another board, basically, sort of like this one.
The NGLA.
NGLA,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so this group works closely with them, but also does other things with grants and things towards neighbors, so you can get other projects done in your neighborhood. But it is an active group within the city.
Okay, and then I think my broad question, and Phil would know best, I think, is just in terms of this action plan and then how we're progressing in Division 0 and the TMP. How do they, coordinate with each other and maybe complement each other?
That's the issue. That's going to be the issue, and indeed, because we are working on two different things and they need to be different for now, but they need to mesh into each other. So we need to make sure that as we move the TMP forward with our new consulting firm, that they are cognizant of what we need to do for Vision Zero as well. But I think what we're talking about is cross-sections changing and possibly impacting our design, our current standards for design. So that goes back to the NACTO.
Yep.
And so that's Vision Zero. It's going to be intermeshed and it's going to be difficult to tie them together, but that's what we're supposed to be doing. So we'll do it.
All right. Well, I'm excited for both ventures, however difficult it will be to mesh them together.
The thing is, they just do really have to be separate to start.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize that piece of it because without the action plan being separate and working toward a goal, but it's good to get that TMP kind of off the starting line first and have Vision Zero following behind so that we can make sure that Vision Zero covers a lot of what the TMP is trying to do. A lot of people might want to put Vision Zero first. I get that, but we need the TMP to go first because you see all the updates that we need to do for our current plan just to bring it into line.
Yeah.
And so Vision Zero will complement that.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. So, thank you.
Sorry.
So I wrote all this down and sent it in an email to you, and I meant to print it out, but it doesn't seem to be in my group of papers here. So I'm just going to speak extemporaneously. Well, I think the strength of that list is it kind of gives some ideas of where to put these ideas. I'm just going to springboard off of what Board Member Wicklund said, in that I think some of these objectives, like eliminate crashes resulting in serious injuries and fatalities, are very big and aspirational, and that we need to identify some specific strategies. I mean, it doesn't have to be down to the leaf level, but maybe just say that's the forest, and now let's say what the trees might be in that arrangement. And so, like reducing VMT, but also just ensuring that through traffic and commuter traffic travels around the town rather than through the heart of the city, creating more of a soft center. Soft center meaning that traffic would be able to drive the speed limit without pressure. Then it's been suggested to me. I've been researching, and one of the things I've researched is Jeff Speck's Walkable City, which is was written 10 years ago, but it's on the 10th anniversary edition came out in 2022. So there have been quite a few updates to it, and something that's talked about is creating not only walkability but bicycleability, as well as vehicle mobility that's safe. And I think some of that vehicle mobility safety has to do with slower traffic speeds. That's been discussed at this board. So I was thinking that either goes under objectives or goes under the action plan items before engineering. Okay, so some of the other items that I had. Went over to, wait, there was another. I don't want to miss it here. Okay, so under engineering number 6, about accelerate sidewalk construction and rehabilitation. Also just to improve the experience of making a walk interesting, making a bicycle path feel safe. And we've had conversations about that too. So they'd be more likely to be used. It's like, I'm just going to, on an aside, say, I like to go down Collier rather than Lashley, because Lashley is so hot in the summer, no shade. Collier, you have to stop more. It's a little, trickier in some ways, but there's that nice canopy, and it's just so much nicer to go down Collier on a bike. All right, so adding to that, I think on the page 14, to policy number 20, city code and state modal traffic codes with amendments. One of the things we've talked about with city code, we've talked about, I know Board Member Wickland is interested in changing codes, having more roundabouts. We've also talked about more narrow streets. The more narrow the street is, the slower traffic will proceed. I think Board Member McInerney has talked about traffic speeds also and things that add to make that more functional. But it was also just in pondering this, saying, you know, we need to look at parking, where parking is positioned and how much parking there is at city centers. It's a big land grab, and one of the reasons why I mention that is a lot of the affordable housing that we're building has been moved to the edges of town, just the way our city grew, and so it makes those who live in those dwellings a little more isolated, a little more separated from services, grocery stores and schools and things that you would go to, jobs, homes, places of worship, just even when you're looking for entertainment. I think there's a list of 10 things that you would be looking for. And so just, I think there's some agreement that the transportation code is going to have to change at least a little bit with Vision Zero. So I don't know exactly how that's going to look, but just identifying what the goal is, the strategy, I guess, to go along with that. Okay, and then I think I may have missed a few things I said, but some of the stakeholders, I was thinking citizen involvement groups, but NGLA would fill that bill. But I also think the Parks and Recreation Board and the Planning and Zoning Board should have a member on our task force, just because if we're talking about zoning, we're talking about codes, they should be involved. The Planning and Zoning and the Parks and Recreation are looking to expand those services throughout the city. So it would be helpful if they could also weigh in on some of our initiatives. Now, did I catch all of them, Phil, or did I miss some on the list I sent you?
We have, I think you hit most all of them. You started with items that promote walkability, bikeability, pedestrian safety, create neighborhood structures with soft centers, consider how to make travel easier to reach home jobs. You mentioned that. You talked about the engineering piece and the policy pieces. Speed management program for number 22, you said ensure safe driving by analyzing ways. A, through traffic travels on outside of city on thoroughfares. B, traffic on residential neighborhoodscapes have soft demands and can comfortably drive 25 miles per hour. C, proper number of cars at proper speed for each road. And then for stakeholders, you said bicycle issues group, you added that one on top of PRAB and citizen neighborhood. You have LDDR, but I don't know what that stands for. Is that LDDA?
I think it's LDDA.
Okay, and we have that listed. Police department, I think we have that listed. I think it's the same. Yep. Okay, I think that's it for what you wrote.
Okay, that's a work in progress, so.
Okay, I don't have a really big list. I do have one lead question because, first off, it seems some of the objectives that we might be talking about are better served by a TMP than the Vision Zero plan. Because Vision Zero is very clear. It's about reducing fatalities and injuries on the roadways. And so that should be our main focus when we're talking about Vision Zero. But be that as it may, does the lead consultant for the TMP have Vision Zero experience?
They do.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, not that it has to be a specialty, but obviously, if they're going to be the lead, consultant for us on TMP, I want them to have experience with Vision Zero and how that's going to either be incorporated and or, as we've talked about, mixing into the TMP. Okay. So on enforcement on 10, And this was just on the Longmont Leader, and we see it a lot from Colorado State Police. Unsafe lane changes and then shoulder riding or running over the shoulder, I think ought to be something that we could try to do some enforcement on, even on city streets. I know we tend to see that maybe more in unincorporated areas, but I still think it happens on city streets. Okay, so there's that. Then, and this is probably more of a general observation question than it is something that we can address on education. I like all the points in regards to this. I guess on 13, creating a comprehensive outreach strategy, I think that's the most important element because we have to reach the users, road users, whether they're on a bike, walk, or of course drive. So I guess in my mind, the question that we're going to have to answer in all respects is why. We're probably going to get the loudest outcry, if you will, from a motorist versus maybe a pedestrian or a cyclist. And so I don't know what that's going to look like in terms of trying to answer the question of why. Now, obviously, I just said it, it's Vision Zero. We're trying to eliminate any and all fatalities, right? And yes, that's an aspirational goal that maybe we should have a date on. However, how do we really educate folks that are using the roads on a daily basis, and the majority of them are in cars, that that's the goal? And then the data collection, I think on the crash report, we covered it last time in regards to, I think we were looking at additional causes, I think, to accidents, I think was something that we discussed. That was something that we didn't have as a category, like distracted driving and that sort of a thing. So again, that would probably be a subheading into this. And then the peer learning opportunities. There are enough communities within, Colorado that have adopted Vision Zero that I hope that we are going to have a robust kind of back and forth network, as well as on a national scale. Eugene, Oregon, Portland, I could name numbers of them. Phil, I mentioned those studies to you. So those are the only comments that I have. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lehner. I think the outline is a great start, so I commend staff for getting that particular ball rolling, and it's very comprehensive. Regarding engineering, I agree with Board Member Wickland on investigating the potential of alternative intersection designs. Regarding enforcement, I also am not in favor of installing red light cameras. I believe that they may encourage motorists to accelerate into intersections in attempts to beat the camera, which is inherently dangerous for any vulnerable users who might be in the intersection at the time. I am in favor of installing speed enforcement cameras, especially mobile units that could be relocated frequently to various high-speed areas in Longmont. The city could use the fine notices to provide information about the benefits of Vision Zero, and I think the city should dedicate the city's share of the fine revenue to Vision Zero initiatives. Regarding education, could we explore with the school district the potential for adding driver training, classroom and on the road, as a high school summer school program elective? That would be a great way to introduce young people to the principles of Vision Zero. On policy matters, regarding number 20, regulations and law, I recently saw a Longmont Police Department vehicle, and it was labeled in really large letters on the side, accident investigation. And that got me wondering whether the legal system in Longmont and the state of Colorado considers crashes that result in deaths and injury as accidents. Could Vision Zero include a reevaluation of how people whose distracted driving or negligence results in death or injury are considered under the law? And also under policy number 29, there are 4 different staff positions identified for year 2024. Will all 4 of those positions be dedicated to Vision Zero? Or if not, are they new staff members who would have some time dedicated to Vision Zero as well as other priorities?
Chair Lanier, Board Member McInerney, I will have to provide you an update on the staffing. During the budget process, we have adjusted and made some changes to those positions. We're still going to be bringing on board a transportation planner that would be dedicated to Vision Zero. That is still in the budget. The civil engineer 1/2, which was mostly going to be looking at implementation of the action plan, that is going to get pushed to 2025. In lieu of that engineering position, the city manager has asked us to bring on a neighborhood resources position to help with the neighborhood coordination during the creation of the action plan. So that's going to be the new position. The transportation engineering assistant is still in the budget, as well as the GIS analyst. And those were, for the most part, would be dedicated to Vision Zero. That was our intention. They're funded for the most part through the streets fund. So they would be dedicated to Vision Zero. That is what we're looking at.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, and that concludes my comments.
Councilmember Burrows? Oh,
So I sent a pretty extensive email to Phil. I don't know if you want me to go into all the details today of what I put into it, but it was pretty long.
There were a lot of details in there, and we did receive that. We'll go through it as staff. You can share as much or as little as you want to with the board. It's up to the chair, I think.
Okay, all right. I'll just choose some choice comments. Yeah, it was a long. There's a lot of comments. So just kind of my overall thoughts about the action plan. I really appreciate there is an action plan and that the city is moving towards Vision Zero. I think it's a great first step to making our city streets safer. But it doesn't really go far enough and it's not detailed enough. Like it's very overarching, but maybe that's the goal. But it doesn't have like specific targets for why they're collecting information and what the information is going to lead to. Let's see. And I don't know if this would be part of the plan, but I would think funding all these changes that are going to be required for Vision Zero. There isn't really any mention of that in the plan, but that should be somewhere in there about how it's going to be funded. And as a pretty strong advocate for bicycling, I would really like more of an emphasis on the multimodal part. So more emphasis on trying to make it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists, because ultimately they're the ones who are the part of the fatalities most of the time. So I think a large emphasis on making the roads safer for them is pretty important because they end up being most of the fatalities from what I understand from crash reports. Okay, that's my general comments. I can give some more specifics on some of the action points, if that's useful. Sure. Okay. So on number 5 for engineering, I had a few extra suggestions for improving some of those intersections. So I'm just going to read from my list. That's all right. Adding raised crossings and intersections. Having some neck downs at intersections. Protected intersections like the new ones that are going to be installed on Kaufman. So really emphasizing safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. And making all crosswalks really visible from all angles. A lot of them are kind of hard to see from one point or another or the other, so really looking at every intersection and analyzing, can everyone see each other? Because if everyone can't see each other, then there's opportunities for crashes. Advanced stop bars, so cars are further back from intersections, so they can again see more easily anyone who's going to be crossing. And I don't remember who mentioned it, which board member, but roundabouts, because they reduce crashes by 70%. So if that seems like a really obvious one to me, to switch out a lot of the signalized intersections to roundabouts, or even just the stop sign ones, because they reduce fatal crashes by 70%. So it seems like an obvious one to me to really look at almost every intersection and change them to roundabouts, because for most of those intersections they can handle that type of volume of traffic. From what I was reading about, I read a lot of studies. So. Where we have bicycle lanes, not having a bicycle box at the intersection, so bikes go in front of the cars rather than adjacent, so cars can see them as they're coming off the where the lights change. And adding bicycle signals, so especially if we have separate bicycle paths, then the bikes would have their own signals. So really separating them from all the different modes, so everyone is at maximum safety. All right, that's my points for number 5. All right, let's see. I have some more suggestions about other engineering projects. I can go into more details if everyone would like. Okay. So generally reducing pedestrian exposure to vehicles along roadways, not just at intersections, but just generally within the city, so that pedestrians aren't so close to fast-moving vehicles right next to them. So things like adding sidewalk cafe seating, like the ones we had on Main Street last year, when we had those restaurants had those seating on the outside. But
So you're talking about parklets into the parking areas?
Well, so like especially if we can like have a sidewalk where we have a restaurant on one side and then there's the walkway for the pedestrians through the middle, and then there's seating that's adjacent to the roadway. So then there's separation between the pedestrian and the fast-moving cars, and then there's presumably going to be some sort of barrier to stop people who are sitting down at the restaurant from falling into the road. So that would give separation for pedestrians from that fast-moving traffic, so they're not directly adjacent to those fast-moving vehicles. Similarly for things like adding street furniture like benches or bollards, those types of things, or some trees, just adding some protection for pedestrians and bicyclists going along those sidewalks so that they are not so close to fast-moving cars, because people make mistakes, and if someone's not paying attention, there could be incidents. Even if it's not an intersection, it's still possible. And next one, I guess. Reducing the pedestrian and bicyclist interactions. So it seems I haven't been on tap very long, but it seems like quite often pedestrians and bicyclists are kind of put into one category. They're not really counted as two different modes of transport. And really they are very different. Like a pedestrian goes at a very different speed to a bicyclist. And so really thinking about separating even those two, because it makes a big difference. It may not be a fatal crash, but it could still be a crash that could be avoided if those two modes were separated out. So thinking about, like, even on pathways we have to have pedestrians in one lane and then bicyclists on another lane, so that there's less incidents of those two colliding. Okay. And since I am a pretty big bicyclist, I will advocate for making a very inclusive bicycle network that is truly connected throughout the whole city, so that then we as bicyclists don't have to go on very unsafe roads or road intersections that are unsafe. If we had our own network, then we wouldn't be sharing the roads with vehicles who are moving much faster than us and less potential of accidents. So I would really promote looking at the whole city as a whole and looking at where those connections are not meeting right now and figuring out how to make those connections happen, so but bicyclists and pedestrians don't have to go on sidewalks that don't exist, or roadways that are not marked, that type of thing. Okay. And let's see. Sorry. And I don't know if this is a general, because this is just the first step, right? So there's no timelines on any of this. Like, when is this? I mean, the whole Vision Zero is by 2040, but there's no broken down steps within the plan. And maybe it's because it's the first step, I don't know.
So further in the back of the plan, there's an item that's just titled Plan Information. We anticipate that each of these items would have a title of action, a lead, support, personnel, action description, reason for action, laying out the objective, and then the time frame and metrics. So it is the start. It's an initial draft. We're not sure what will end up in it, but each of those actions that is laid out in the plan would be further described as we develop the plan. That's why it'll take most of a year to lay all those out.
Okay, I figured as much, but I just wanted to kind of make that point just in case that wasn't in your thought process. Shall I continue? I have more points. Okay, so that was mostly my engineering suggestions. Oh, sorry, I missed a couple. I would advocate for less bike lanes and more separation, because I feel like bike lanes give a false sense of safety. All it takes is one tiny nudge by a car and you're flattened as a bicyclist. So I really would love to see the city move towards less bike lanes, or at least truly separated bike lanes, to protect those bicyclists who are using those lanes, because there's been many times where a large vehicle has almost run me over, and I have kids in my bike, so it's not feeling very safe. So it's great that we have bike lanes, but some studies I read actually make some of the roads more unsafe, and cars actually give less space to someone in a bicycle lane than someone if it's just an unmarked road, because it gives them a line that they can use as a guide. But then I find that unless I'm like way over, then they'll try and sneak by me, and it's still sharing a lane, and it's not 3 feet then, at least for me. And so an unmarked road, I always find that a vehicle will stay behind me until they can safely pass me, and there's no one coming ahead of them, and they'll veer out onto the other side of the road to make that pass. So actually, most of the time for me, it's safer on an unmarked road than a marked road. That's just my experience. But it's also in the study. But it was a study that came out of Australia, where they did a comparison of like, I want to say 18,000 interactions between a car and a bike, with bike lanes and unlined roads. And that was basically, there was like 7 feet versus 3 feet. So 7 feet for the unmarked and 3 feet for the marked roads. But it makes sense from my experience. That's also what I've noticed too. So I would say some of the streets in Longmont, I think, could be converted from car sharing to only pedestrian and bike. This would be pretty radical, I think, but there are some roads that have almost no driveways or curb cuts, and they could easily be converted more easily to pedestrian and bike only. And so that would be ways for pedestrians and bikes to get through the city without having to have any interaction with a car at all. And there's some pretty quiet streets on some spots that those changes could be made pretty easily, I think. There wasn't a mention about school zones, and I know that it's come up in TAB before where people have been concerned about school zones and how to make those safer. So I feel like that really should be in here, because schools are really important, and having kids around really fast moving vehicles is always a potential for crashes. So really examining how we can make schools and the school zones safer, I think should be a big priority too. Okay, that was it. That was all of my ones for engineering. Enforcement. So I would like to add to enforcement parking of vehicles in bike lanes and blocking bike lanes, because it happens all the time. And not that the bike lanes are wonderfully safe, but it's nice to have a space you can go, and then there's a car that parks into those bike lanes, and then all of a sudden you have to veer into traffic, and then it becomes more unsafe. So if there could be enforcement about that, that would be really nice. And I'm not sure if that's part of the city code or enforcement right now, but I don't think it's often enforced.
So the next two items, that item and the next one, I won't steal your thunder, but both of those are in our city code today, and it's just a matter of enforcing.
Okay, so if we can promote those to happen more often, that would be really. So the second one I added was changing priorities at crosswalks. So if a pedestrian or bike is standing to cross at a crosswalk, that's not a signalized one, but just a crosswalk, that they have priority, and that the car is required to stop for them, even when they're not in the intersection, when they're just standing waiting to cross. Because pretty much no one ever stops. And so you end up standing there for a really long time. So, but I don't think that's ever, I've never seen it enforced. And I'm sure it's hard to enforce, but maybe having that part as the education for drivers too. Sorry, I was stealing a thunder there. Because, yeah, I mean, as a pedestrians and bicyclists always have to do all the waiting in the city, and it would be really nice if the cars had to wait for us, because it's stop and start, stop and start, stop and start. So it'd be nice if it was more continuous. Okay, education. I would really like, so a majority of the crashes within Longmont, from my understanding, comes from cars. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it stands to reason that we really should try and have less cars driving. Therefore, we would have less crashes. So I think as part of the education, we should really try and advocate for people choosing other modes of transportation. So either bike or pedestrians or public transportation. But in order for that to happen, all those other ones need to come up to higher standard. to really make that change. But I think long term, the city really needs to look at how to get less people driving and more people on their feet and in public transport to really reduce crashes for the long term. Because all these measures are great, but they're just kind of like a little tiny step. It's not going all the way to really doing it for the long term. Of course, there's other benefits as well, of course, but mostly for emissions and stuff. And I know that NGLA will be part of the process of education, but I think really engaging the public and trying to get their points of view as extensively as possible, because everyone has experiences as they move around the city and they have safety concerns at this intersection or that intersection or this point in town or this other point, and really trying to gather all those together to form a comprehensive plan will be super useful. But gathering all that information is the challenge, of course. Okay, I'm onto policy now. So I don't know if I suggest changing the policy on the priority for the transportation modes for all developments moving forward, changing from being car-centric and providing ample parking for all cars and making it so it's truly accessible for every transportation mode safely. So pedestrians being the slowest mode of transportation and the most vulnerable, they should be the first priority on thinking about any future developments. And then moving through from bike is a little less vulnerable than a pedestrian because they're moving a little faster, and then public transport and then car should be last in future developments, because ultimately we're trying to stop fatal crashes, and so we should be protecting the most vulnerable first. So we should all be thinking pedestrians first. And under the speed management program, consider reducing speeds across the city, because speed is often the thing that will cause a fatal crash. If cars were moving slower, then there would be no fatality or less injury at least. So just having a policy of just reducing all the speeds, reducing the speed limits, and then making the roads narrower, as someone else suggested, like really advocating for reducing all the speeds in other cars will help on those fatalities as well. I would also like to add as a policy snow removal. Right now, snow removal prioritizes cars and making roadways clear, and really doesn't really consider accessibility for, say, a wheelchair user trying to cross the street when there's a mound of snow blocking that intersection. There's just no way through, and that happens pretty consistently. I know it's a real challenge, especially when we have high snowfalls, but generally the plan is to clear the roads for the cars first, and then everyone else is second. And we might clear that mound of snow in front of that crosswalk, but we might not. It might be there for 2 or 3 months, and then everyone has to figure out how to go around it. So changing the policy on how snow is removed and making it safer for our most vulnerable first, and then going to cars, would be making everyone more safe. And I don't know if this goes into this section, but I suggested creating a map that residents can, because I learned from the BIC that the way that a resident points out a dangerous intersection, they have to pay for that to go forward and for it to be just what they for if they want, say, adding a crosswalk, for example, at a certain intersection, and so that's not very inducive for residents to give their opinions and have those changes made.
I would apologize if any of that came across at the BIC, that
Okay.
that was payment by residents. It's anything in city streets, we have different planning processes that we go through, and we make sure that we get those done if they're needed, if they're warranted. So, city will do that typically.
I thought it was to like apply to have a change made.
Yeah, if you want a speed reduction, items implemented into the street, you go through our process and talk to Kyle over here, well, Caroline, who will be here next month. And that starts the process of the neighborhood traffic mitigation program. If you want neck downs or any of the different slowing pieces, but we don't charge the residents for that.
Oh, okay.
Just
Okay,
make that
that's good.
public.
I sorry
Sorry,
for my
I don't know
misunderstanding.
how that came across, but
Yeah, no,
okay.
I can't. Yeah, I thought it was like there was like a fee of like $170. I was like, wow, that's crazy.
It is free. All it requires is time and 5 signatures for the affected area to start a traffic study. And then traffic calming measures require a 50% plus one vote currently to implement measures for the neighborhood.
Okay, all right. So on that same vein, it's good that it doesn't cost money. I really think the reporting of dangerous points in the city needs to be improved. The name is escaping me right now. The way that you service works, is that what it is? Where you report a problem. It's kind of slow, and it's not. You don't really know if your request is going anywhere. I think it would be much better if we had like a map where you could like mark on the map where there is a dangerous location.
That is an element of Service Works. So there's a mapping element if you'd
Okay.
like to use that.
Okay.
You can kind of put in the location if you'd like, or you can actually find it on a map and kind of pinpoint it and let us know. And typically within 24 hours, I believe, the city gets back and responds and says kind of where that request is within the list and who's working on it. So if that's not happening, let us know.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
I requested something about a year ago and it's still sitting. But okay, that's good to know. Maybe I didn't notice the map part. Okay. All right. And I already talked about adding funding as part of the plan, because I think that is, I mean, nothing happens without funding. So I really feel like that has to be a really well thought out plan about how to actually make these projects come to fruition, because it will involve, I would imagine, a significant amount of money. I didn't work for the city, but it seems like the projects are pretty expensive. So having a plan for funding seems like it should be in the plan to me. Okay, I think that's about it. Are you sure? I think so.
So pretty much all I had has been talked about thus far, and I appreciate all the explanations, Phil. Could you clarify what you meant earlier or the discussion earlier about is it cameras on the red lights, right? I'm not from Colorado. I didn't grow up here, so I thought that was the norm across, yeah.
I'll pass it to Kyle for some further explanation on that. He's the expert.
So, my understanding previously, like in the early thousands, Longmont did have red light cameras along with a lot of other cities in the nation. They're generally received pretty negatively from the public, just as perception that it was just a money scheme for the city to get more money, lack of representation when you're actually getting ticketed. There's no physical officer citing you and observing that would happen. So that's been kind of a sore point for the last few years. There has been a new bill that passed through the Colorado legislation that allows cities to create their kind of own criteria, and there are limits on how much fines can be. But there is more openness to having those automated speed or red light violation cameras. A lot of it comes down to just public perception and then there's mixed evidence on whether those have been effective and fair when enforcing red light violations.
Okay, thank you, because I wasn't 100% aware of all that. And I got in the mail today just a bill for like going on the toll road. I didn't even realize it. So that's what I thought about, because it included a booklet, like a pamphlet on like information about how to get a pass to make sure this doesn't happen again. So I was wondering if maybe Longmont would be able to implement something like that as well.
Well, I'm not sure of your question because we're talking about tolls, but also the tolls for the red light running and the speed radar cameras. As Kyle mentioned, there was a bill that was passed that makes it easier for us as a jurisdiction to put in red light running cameras and the speed radar or the speed photo cameras. So that's going to be one tool that we look at as far as the action plan goes. So we'll need to evaluate that as a community. And so that'll go through, we'll talk about all these different things as we come back to you with the action plan. The next steps after the action plan starts to get implemented is what things do you want, and then you'll make a recommendation to city council. What things do they want, or what would you recommend to council that they look at as far as some of those tools? And I think these are easily tools that we could implement as far as whether you want to move to the next step with those for Vision Zero. As Kyle mentioned, there's different levels of effectiveness, so you'll want to weigh those as well when it comes to your recommendation to city council.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, thank you. No, no worries. So all of the ideas I heard were really, really good. So it sounds like you will be applying for more grants. It sounds like more money. Show me the money. Yeah. So all of the ideas are really, really good. I will suggest that it's still interesting how those ideas are so aspiring, but yet it's so much more to it, And so this action plan was the first step, and I appreciate the outline of this action plan, the beginning stages of Vision Zero, and everything. Because when I went to other cities, that was the first thing the government said, you gotta have an action plan. For most cities, you have to start with an action plan. So once we get the consultant will be able to help with making sure that all of those line items are in more details with your suggestions. So everything that you all said was pretty good. Some other things like I would suggest, Kyle can say otherwise, but do some research with public safety and find out exactly why we have to have those cameras, because there's more to it than just speeding and giving people tickets. There are people that come in this city that commit crimes, and we have no way of proving it, but those cameras put those license plates on it, and then we know they're not from here. So that's just one little itty bitty thing, but there are other reasonings to why we do what we do. So to defend some of the choices that we make, I do suggest that when you ask some of those things, make sure that you understand before the stuff come to council why you're asking it, and make sure you do your research, because it will be thrown back at you with other questions to make sure you know what you're talking about. And I understand the research from Australia and New Zealand and all of that, but making sure how effective it will be here. I do agree with the roundabouts. I don't like them, but it does help with speeding, and that's so obvious. It is really obvious, and some things I agree with for sure. So I just kind of wanted to throw I always say this, my little 2 cents in, but I know how much work you all have done in this plan and moving forward, because this step is is what help us to move forward with asking for funding. Every step, we can get more funding in this process. And then don't forget that, you know, once we put this information out there to the community, they may come up with, you know, 15 lists of other things that you didn't even think about that they see on a daily basis. Like you're giving your experiences on the bike, right? So important. And then thinking about the people in the community in those school zones that have their own interpretation or, you know, of what happens to them on a daily basis. So, so all of this is going to change constantly because once we start getting out there into the community and NGLA asking those questions, having surveys, however they will address in with community engagement, everything you say will be addressed, but I'm pretty sure they're going to come back with much, 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 much more. So I appreciate all of your suggestions, and a lot of it definitely is on point. But when you're very specific, just make sure that when you all get it down to the nitty gritty and come to council, I suggest, this is just Shakita's suggestion, that you do a little bit more research on how effective it will be, positively effective moving forward, and how fast would that happen? How fast can that happen? Because we got bike lanes. You know how many cities that really don't even have bike lanes yet? So we're progressively moving forward more and more. So I'm so appreciative of that. And I like the idea of the space out. And then don't forget also CDOT is some of the reasons why we can't do some of the things that we do too. So just be mindful of all of those things. See, I'm learning something, Phil. I'm learning. See? But anyway, I just want to say thank you for all that you all have brought up. It was really, really good points, and I like all the suggestions.
Okay, so we have covered the comments for staff on the TMP, or I'm sorry, the Vision Zero plan. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up. There's no action items. Or do we want to, Phil, do you want to address anything in regards to what's gone around up here?
I just wanted to thank you all very much for all the information because this is really going to move us into that next level of detail. I mean, I think we almost have an action plan done at this point. So we have talked about actually doing it maybe in-house, quite frankly. I mean, we talked about consulting firms and spending some money there, but we have kind of kicked it around a little bit about maybe doing this in-house for the action plan piece of it. But we'll see how that works out. There's funding available for the action plan and for the implementation pieces of this. Mm-hmm. So we'll be looking at all of this as we move forward through this. But really appreciate your time and effort. You obviously have all put a lot of thought into the action plan, and we wanted to do it last month, but we had a lot of things on the agenda, and so this month opened up, and it was great. So thank you.
Regarding Vision Zero, what's the status of the city's search for a Vision Zero coordinator?
The status is that we are just starting that process. So we just found out that we might have some funding to be able to move into the 2023 budget. And so we're working with that to see if we can't accelerate the idea of getting this Vision Zero transportation planner who will primarily focus on transportation planning, but there's other elements to they'll be focused on Vision Zero, but there are other elements of transportation planning that they'll likely do as well. We've got some turnover coming, I'll just say that, and so we got to be ready for making sure that we have some coverage there too. So we'll see how that looks. Any more on that? I think that's it.
Just a question on your time frame for like when are you going to have a finalized plan, or when do you anticipate to have a finalized plan and moving to the next steps? Do you have like a framework for how that's going to time out?
Our timeline is really based on that person being hired. We need a coordinator, and so that person will be in charge of taking all the different things that you've said here tonight, the things that we have in our planning processes and engineering processes, and putting those together into a timeline. And we're going to push them pretty hard to get this done quickly because we understand that it's a city council priority. It's a city priority. So we'll make sure that that happens. But again, we've kind of just done some shuffling of some funding to make sure we can get somebody hired before 2024, which is really when that next budget starts in January. So we'd like to get things started before then.
Real quick question. You mentioned that you all were thinking about doing, instead of hiring a consultant, doing it in-house. Well, I just want to say that this is a very informed advisory board, and I, as city council, would be very comfortable for them to have you all as advisories instead of a council, and having the city giving your ideas. And I know some of you will be on the task force. So, I mean, I don't know if that's finalized or anything, but this is the first time I heard of that. So
It's just something we're kicking around as staff because there are so many examples of action plans out there that when we
Yeah.
started looking at them, you can put a lot of money and effort into them and make them really pretty, or you can put less money and more just quality time into them and make a really quality product. And so we're talking about how to make that work at the city staff level. And if we do have a person on board, that could be something that
Yeah.
they do immediately out of the gate once they come on board, and really put that into their, into their lane, I guess, and run with it. So, just
well, I
something
think that's
we're-
a really good idea.
Okay.
That's all. I just wanted to say I think it's a good idea. I wouldn't go against it because I'm on this sitting right here with these wonderful people who have really good ideas and do their research, obviously. The other thing is, how soon do you think you all will have that website up? Because I did see on the list you will have a Vision Zero website up. I know that's part of the action plan, but
I think it's still part of next year's
really?
piece of
Okay.
this. Yeah, again, it goes back to the coordinator and making sure that we can start to work with them to put all the different things in line to make sure we're on top of it. But my understanding is the city's going to redo their website completely, so we've all been kind of waiting for that to happen. We'll see when that kind of triggers and goes forward, and then we'll have that website once a person's on board to help direct that. But
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be great with the task force piece of it, because that's gonna be the communication piece
Right.
with the task force.
Well, I just want to know, once we get started, that website will be that point where people go back and forth to look and see what's happening, the progress, the updates, and things like that. Even if it says, coming soon, right? So that's why I'm asking. If nothing else, and maybe somebody on staff can at least put that together sooner than later, and then say coming soon, task force is forming, something like that. I think that would be very beneficial, and that start engaging people. And also I'm being selfish, also for city council, so that we can start addressing people somewhere. Because when people come to us and ask us those questions, it's coming soon, but check out the website. It's not much, but we're on the way. So
I think we can also use our Engage Longmont aspect of that, so we can actually have more dialogue there and answer people's questions just like we are here, but with citizens. Thanks.
Okay, so I think what we can do, and we'll start from this end, so Councilmember Kim can speak first. We'll do our comments from the board members.
Don't really have anything to say. It's been very informative tonight, and I look forward to the next meeting.
So I know I had a lot of suggestions for Vision Zero, but I do want to really acknowledge and thank the staff for all their hard work. I'm sure it's taken a long time to put this together, and so I don't want to make you feel like I don't appreciate the fact that you spent that time doing that, because I'm sure it was extensive work, and even getting to this point, I'm sure it's been a long time, and so I really want to appreciate your efforts there. And then I wanted to make a little comment about the transportation summit that We attended, was it last week? It was the 30th or 31st. I learned a lot during that summit. It was very eye-opening for me because I've never attended a summit where it's not about science, but since I'm a scientist by training. But it was really informative, learning about the processes of how we move our transportation forward as a state, not just within a city. But it also made me kind of disappointed also because of the timeframes they were talking about and all the many struggles and difficulties. I totally understand that it's a massive undertaking trying to bring commuter rail to Colorado, but it feels like it's not a very high priority from this resident's point of view. They want to do it, but they put out these really lofty long-term goals that really don't seem very attainable, like having a time frame of 2040 to 2050. Might as well say we're not doing it, because by the time you get to 2040 or 2050, the money that's going to be required for those projects is going to be way higher than it is right now, and so they have to find even more funding, and it just keeps kind of pushed forward and forward. So at some point, I really feel like the state has to decide, are they really going to do it? In which case, they actually do need to do it, or just say we're just not going to try and we're going to put the money to something else, because having these really long, lofty goals is just really disappointing for, I think, many residents, because they've put their tax dollars into it and nothing has happened yet. So that was just my comments about the Transportation Summit.
I'd like to start by going back to the minutes of our August meeting and follow up on a couple issues there. If you go to page 8, lines 23 to 25, there was a question raised about one of the CIP projects, namely TRP-121, whether it was funded or unfunded, because it was listed both ways. And I'm wondering if that issue was resolved in the CIP that went to City Council.
We'll check again on that.
I think it was Board Member Wicklund who brought it up initially. Okay, moving on to page 8, line 13. At the August meeting, I requested a link to the language itself of the street tax ballot measure. And has that been located yet?
That's on me for not providing that. It's out there. We have it, so I'll send it to you. I apologize for that. I did see that in the minutes as well and said, oh, need to get that going. So apologize for not getting that out to the group.
Okay, thank you. I'm very encouraged that the Vision Zero program is underway. So I see the outline and all of our discussion and the activities that are starting to take place and the prospective hiring of a Vision Zero coordinator as all very, very positive things. And as I mentioned last month, I'm delighted that many of the capital improvement program projects for the 2024 to 2028 period include improvements that will further Vision Zero objectives. And finally, I will not attend the October TAB meeting. I hope that my absence won't prevent achieving a quorum, but I would like to review and comment on the crash report, which I understand is coming up next month. So should I expect to receive that on Thursday afternoon, October 6th?
We hope to get that to you Wednesday afternoon, October 5th.
That'd be great, thank you. That's it for me.
Well, thank you all for your comments about Vision Zero. I'm always amazed at how, as a group, we each have our own perspective and bring fresh content to the discussion. And I want to bring to everyone's attention the amount of work that Phil and Jim have done recently. They've been in budget discussions. Oh, I'm sorry, and Kyle too. Which I'm sure I'm sure Kyle has prepared a lot of the information that's been presented to City Council, and it's been a lot of long hours. And one thing I noticed about the transportation presentation is how the projects are on budget, how they've been so well as much as possible, how they are being completed upon according to schedule as planned for the most part, and particularly how much City Council recognized both Phil and Jim for the amount of money and funding they were able to find for Vision Zero as well as for microtransit. And at that time, at the budget meeting, I think Phil said that he had requested $600,000 from RTD for microtransit, and he had received $400,000. And that's in competition with other cities in the area. So that was very well recognized. And if I'm understanding what you said today, Phil, that RTD is interested in ponying up more for microtransit.
Well, when you look, they actually programmed out for 3 years. And so when you look at the 3-year totals for all the different cities that applied, Longmont got the highest level of the whole region.
Yeah.
So we're pretty proud of that.
Yeah, very well done. Very well done. And, just a nice little round of applause there, guys. So I think we're really moving forward. It seems like we have a tight-knit group and a very well-organized and thoughtful group. So I have utter confidence that we're going to get Vision Zero off the ground and running. And I thank you all for your participation tonight. It was very instructional for me.
Yeah, that was a interesting conversation on Vision Zero. I would second board member Burrows on, Vision Zero is really about changing that paradigm. So changing the number one is the most vulnerable, and the last one is the SOVs, the single occupancy vehicle. So, and I hope in the years to come we really achieve that. The other, let's see, and then also I really enjoyed the conversation on the engineering because, I think we do sometimes in this country spend too much time on enforcement when physics works better than science is what I like to say. So, and then lastly, I guess 3 last points. Kyle, thank you that we got a fix on that irrigation problem. Phil, thank you for yesterday. That was kind of fun. And then also thanks for the transportation department for paying the ticket price for the transportation summit. It was, my perspective, I'm disappointed in the train because I was 13 when that passed. I'm much older now. But then also what I did value in the presentations was WashDOT and ODOT giving presentation on land use changes. So I hope also Longmont is looking into that either through the TMP or through the whole planning department. So to really narrow down our land use plan to then also create a transportation plan. So that's what I'm looking forward to in the future. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for listening to all of our input today for Vision Zero. I'm excited to see where it goes. I also want to acknowledge the 10-year anniversary of the flood and give my sincere thanks for the transportation department for all you've done to rebuild and make Longmont more resilient. As well as I was looking forward to the peak RSTD study that was supposed to happen at this meeting. And I am just curious as to if that will be put back on the agenda in the future.
Yeah, my apologies. The peak service study was done by RTD when they presented in May.
Oh, okay.
So a few of you did miss that. The newer members did miss that. I apologize. we can have them come back. They were also at yesterday's meeting, so they do come occasionally. They'll also be at the Rhythm at Roosevelt. So if you want to catch them there, they'll give you a download of kind of where we are in the process. Again, that's the peak service study by RTD, so they'll have we'll share a booth with them.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and I guess my kind of general final comments, I guess I'll say, very thoughtful reading by everybody of the outline and input. I thought it was great. And I think actually Councilmember Yarbrough probably summed it up with show me the money, because as we all know that we can have a lot of initiatives and a lot of things we'd like to achieve, but in the end, we understand that there's a lot of cost, and we have to weigh that against the benefit. And when we're still talking about this paradigm of shifting, I still look at education, adoption, education. And I don't know the answer in regards to, because let's face it, the majority of the folks using the roads today are motorists. You're not going to change their mind by a slogan or by saying it once, right? And so I don't know what that looks like in regards to education, but I think for us, that's probably a key in regards to getting the community to get behind the idea of zero fatalities, right? And it starts with road users, and it goes down to the most vulnerable. Phil, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I know it seems like there's a beginning point or a start line for Vision Zero, and until we get to that start line, we're not doing anything. But I just want to be really clear that we've been doing Vision Zero for as long as I've been with the city. We just didn't ever call it that, right? We didn't know really what it was. But one of the ideas that we have with the education piece, we worked on it today with the communications team actually, and it fell right into the Vision Zero aspect, was doing some social media outreach where we do some quizzes and just find out, kind of push, how social media is all about like kind of pointing the finger and doing different things that maybe not be as positive, but we're thinking that there's an aspect out there of just throwing a quiz out there. Did you know, or do you know, or do you know the answer to this question, kind of thing, and then do some multiple choice things and just have people start to think about it, and then their comments can be whatever the comments are going to be, but at least we've gotten people thinking about the idea of when a person is standing at an intersection and it's an unmarked crosswalk, does a car have to stop for that person? And then you can select whatever you think, and then we'll give them the correct answer at the end. And just little things like that can help kind of get to that idea, I think, of educating and getting people some idea of, oh, I didn't know that kind of thing. So those are things we're going to try out in the interim before we have an action plan.
No, agreed. And I recognize and say that the VRUs, vulnerable road users, are the ones that we do need to start with in regards to the idea that they require the most protection, of course, and they should. So at any rate, those are just my comments. Thank you, staff. I know you've put a lot of time and effort into this, and you've had a lot of discussions outside of obviously here. So I appreciate all the work that you folks do as well.
I know I'm talking to a lot tonight. I know. I just wanted to say, Vice Chair Chris took my thunder. I was just going to say thanks again for all the funding that that you are looking out for. It takes a lot to constantly looking and see what's available, what you can apply for, what we qualify for. So thanks for that, because if you don't apply, we wouldn't have it, right? So I appreciate that. And those of us who work in nonprofit and always applying for grants because we need the money, it's a lot of work. And the reporting with it as well is a lot of work. So I just want to just say that, and then also say that I do too agree that education is so important. This journey being on city council has shown so much to me and for me, because a lot of things, like I'm not a cyclist, So, you know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, but I learned a lot. Going to different meetings about what you should do as a motorist. And I think one of the issues we do have to remember and be mindful of is that there are a lot of transplants here where the same rules do not apply where they come from. You know, so if you come from a city where people are not cyclists everywhere and people are implementing walking a lot, you know, then they're not used to the rules and being respectful and mindful to cyclists and pedestrians. So that's why I agree that education is very, very important. And then for me, I'm a cook. I'm just using this example real quick. I love to cook, so I like a gas stove. But I'm on city council. I can't light gas stoves, right? So, so it's just about the education. Oh, Shakita, you know we have induction. Sarah, you have induction stoves and ovens, and that's work just as good. And da da da. I'm like, no, it doesn't. You know, but it's just about the education piece, right? It's hard to change people who are used to the traditional ways. And we are not exposed to going to different countries and see how they do it and how efficiently it works, those processes and everything, then we don't know. You know, the vulnerable community may not have those experiences either. Thinking about we trying to get rid of the cars, we know that that's going to be the number one challenge, because if you're a single parent and you work outside of the city of Longmont and you're on a board and your kids are in soccer and football, who's cycling where? No, that won't work, right? So we have to have grace with those people as well, but then have accommodations for those who are able to for that change, like myself now being single, but I have no small kids. But what can I do when I'm a meeting in Lafayette and a meeting here? What can I do that will make my time more efficient as well? So those are things that we have to look at and say, well, people like Shakita, we can't worry about her right now, but what about the people we can work with? Right? And so I think that that's the thing that we need to look at. Who can we touch first that will be willing to change, that we can influence? And I think there are a lot more people out there that would be willing to change, that we can influence with this data than those who are not. But I just want you all to be mindful that there are a lot of people like me that still want a gas stove. So, thank you.
Thank you. So I guess we need a motion to close the meeting. Oh, items for upcoming agenda.
I
So
think you're all well aware
Crash
of the
report.
crash report, and we'll get that to you as early as we possibly can. And can't say that we're hoping we won't run into the same issues as last year, but I can't say that we won't. But I think we're on a good track. I think we're on track. I think we'll get it. We'll be good. But we have had a number of meetings so far to chat about that internally. So I think we're on a good track.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll look forward to seeing that pre-meeting. Now we can move to an adjournment. Anybody would like to make a motion?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No? Okay. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.